Meeting will come to order. Welcome, everybody. This is the Trails and Open Space Committee meeting. We've taken attendance.
Yes.
Great. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes of the October 29th, 2025 meeting. Do I hear a motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
So moved.
There's a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Next is Jason. Would you like to jump in here? We want to authorize the transfer of funds from the open space reserve and amend 2025 county budget in relation thereto. Jason, you add some color to this.
Absolutely. So this is a 2024 open space project in the town of Stillwater, the Tanner Ridge PDR project. We've gotten everything they need approved by the county auditor. A contract's been signed, so we're ready to move those funds out of the reserve. So the award amount was $183,332. So this transfer allows the money to be moved from the reserve to the operating account, and hoping to get this out the door and closed by the end of the year. So this one's ready to go.
Good questions. Hearing none, can I have a motion to for it?
So moved.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jason. Our next item of business is authorizing the transfer of funds from the County Trails Development Reserve and amending the 2025 county budget in relation to thereto. Jason Kemper again, add color to this discussion.
So we've got two grants here, 24 and 23, Malta and Half Moon, authorized via resolution 216 of 23 and 211 of 24. Both of those have submitted their reimbursement requests approved by the auditor, so they're ready for payment. So the total amount of that reserve transfer from the Trails Reserve to the Trails Grant Program is $19,545.
Any questions? I have one. Both these items, the preceding one and this one, they been out there for a while.
Yeah, so it's we have a number of the chart here. We have a number of outstanding open space and trails projects. So if they're outside of the calendar year, the current budget year, we need to move those funds out of reserve in order to pay those. So yeah, about 27 trail projects out there right now and 10 open space projects. So open space usually takes a lot longer and they're more complicated. The trail projects, we've been municipalities to complete them, and I mean we're wrapping up a lot of them. We've got a couple old ones out there, but those ones are not the fault of the municipality because of the delays. So but we're trying.
Great.
You know, yeah, there's 37 pending right there, not counting this year that we're monitoring. So it's a lot, not counting the ED grants on top of that.
Any other questions? We have a motion to move this forward.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And our next, we're going to have a discussion from Jason. Sorry. Oh, yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Contract there. Jason, you'd like to have the floor again, please.
Yeah, so just I give a monthly summary of where we are with all the grants. So there's our 10 open space projects. You can see we're moving one off the books today. They'll be paid out. Another one probably in our next committee meeting, which would most likely be February. That's coming off the books. We've got two others that are getting close. So of the 10, we got 3 or 4. I hope by first quarter 26, those are closed out. And we got our 27 outstanding trail projects. There's a summary of those there. We're actively working with all those municipalities, so trying to close those out as well. We received our petitions for the agricultural districts. There's a summary there of the petitions that were received, and if they were located in a municipality, those were mailed out to the supervisors with a summary of those back on November 10th. So our next step there is the Farmland Protection Board will meet and go over those inclusions into the agricultural district, and then I'll be back in front of this committee in the new year to present those inclusions. We will hold a public hearing, and then ultimately those will be adopted and added to the Saratoga County Ag District, either Ag District 1 or Ag District 2. So first step, nothing for the committee yet, but you'll be seeing these as we get into the new year.
Great. And Jason, we have a presentation, I understand.
Yep, and just quickly, we had another meeting, Graphite Range Community Forest Advisory Committee. And then just I wanted to thank DPW. They mowed our carnivore mitigation habitat up on Edie Road, so that was completed before the end of the year. So we've got a couple mitigation sites. We've got the new stuff we completed over in the town of Northumberland, but this is on Edie Road. This is one of the older sites, so we completed our required mowing and helped out DEC there, so that was all completed. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Amanda Kinley and Ed Snyder from GPI. They're our consulting engineers for the Zim Smith. So usually this time of year, we always give a yearly update on where we are with the Zim. I know several supervisors have asked for a status update. We've been delayed a little bit with the environmental assessment process, so they're going to take the floor and just give an update for the committee on the Zim Smith.
Great, thank you. Welcome, folks.
Good. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I think I've seen most of you before, but my name is Amanda Kinley. I'm the project manager for GPI. Are the engineering consultant, as Jason mentioned, for the Zim Smith Trail. So I'm going to go over some project updates of some things since last time we went through the project and what to expect in our upcoming efforts. So just a recap of what we've talked about previously, based on the feasibility study that was done in 2021, we obtained preliminary design and final design funding, federal funding. We identified a desired route for the trail. We identified potential impacts based off of that, and based off of the impacts that we saw from the desired route, we met with New York State DOT and FHWA. And based on that meeting, it was determined that an environmental assessment would likely be needed. From that point, we also met with property owners, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And from those meetings, we identified some other possible routes, which we'll go over. So what has happened since it's been a little quiet? There's been a lot going on in the background. But we've met multiple times with New York State DOT and FHWA to discuss the process that we'll be following moving forward with the project. It's fairly complex in what we'll be doing and what we need to do. It's kind of like a step backwards from where we were, but it will end up being better for the project long term to make sure that we're on good legal foundation to move forward with the project and the preferred route. So we've also obtained additional funding through coordination with CRTC for the environmental assessment report development, which is good. That will take some of the onus off of the county in order to pay for that. So we did develop what is referred to as a pre-EA initiation package per guidance we got from FHWA during our initial meetings with them. Since then, they decided that they did not want that package after it was already developed. But the good news is a lot of that information is being used for the report that we're developing now. So based on FHWA's guidance, we have begun developing a scoping report, and I'll go into that a bit more. We also have been refining the conceptual designs of the routes that we developed. And we have developed a detailed document for historic coordination, and we continue to talk to Jason about everything that's going on frequently. We've discussed this a little bit before, but for property owner outreach, which is one of the things that initiated some of the environmental assessment discussions, letters were mailed to all the property owners along the initial route, preferred route that was identified before we determined an environmental assessment would likely be needed. If we couldn't get a hold of the property owners, we did hand deliver letters to make sure we could get a hold of them. We met with any property owners that requested meetings. We also, and Jason, met with municipalities that requested meetings about the initial route. And we discussed some of the property impacts that would be associated with those with some of the municipalities. So what considered routes do we have? We have a lot of them based off suggestions from property owners and from municipality meetings. So we have 14 possible routes to get from the current terminus at Oak Street up to Saratoga Spa State Park, which would be the ultimate terminus for Saratoga or for Zim Smith Trail. So the routes break down generally as one possible route from Oak Street to East High Street, 4 possible from East High to Malta Avenue, 4 possible from Malta Avenue to North Line, 3 from North Line to Saratoga Spa State Park, and 2 possible routes within Saratoga Spa State Park to get you to the North-South Road entrance, or the New York State Route 50 entrance. So what is the scoping report and why are we doing it? The scoping report is the big step back that we're taking to kind of take a look at the project holistically and in more depth so that we can document the project well. So during the scoping report, we're establishing purpose, need, and objectives of the project. That's incredibly important for federally funded projects. That's one of the main requirements that we need to establish to move forward for this project. We're going to be screening all 14 of those concepts based on those purpose, need, and objectives. So determining how well they meet those, and if not, we are hoping to either dismiss or progress those concepts further. So that's the biggest part of the scoping report is we don't want to move 14 concepts forward. That's a lot of effort for us. That's a lot for Jason. So we want to identify what is a feasible build route and move that forward through the scoping report and then into our next reporting. So the milestone steps for the scoping report is the draft scoping report, which we're working on now, a public information meeting, or could also be called a scoping meeting, and a final scoping report. So during the scoping report phase, there's not a lot of environmental coordination. You're not supposed to do most coordination until you have gone through the scoping report to the final. So we have done some just to determine the degree of impact so that we can do the screenings for those routes. We did previously coordinate with the floodplain administrators when we were determining the impacts initially. And we developed a 160-page document to identify historic resources within the project limits for DOT. So what they'll do with that is they'll look at it based on previously developed and undeveloped land, and then look at if there's anything that isn't publicly available as an eligible or nationally registered property or feature to determine if we need to be considering those when we're evaluating these routes. So something that comes to mind for that would be we are planning to put a proposed bridge option where the old trolley bridge was behind this pump station. So that would be something that doesn't pop up as a historic resource, but it could be argued that it is one. So something that we're going to be considering and coordinating more with DOT. So the big thing is the environmental assessment. So when we talk about this, this is basically a determination of if the project could cause significant environmental effects. So this is actually going to be combined with what we call a draft design report. So for all federally projects, a draft design report is required. So this will be a DDR/EA. So we'll do all of the preliminary design and the environmental assessment at the same time. So that will include that same purpose, need, and objectives that we identified in the scoping report. We'll talk about the alternatives that were considered. So we'll be just talking about the ones that we screened that were progressing from the scoping report forward. So we'll drop the ones that don't make sense during the scoping phase. We'll go into detail for environmental impacts and what our next steps would be. So any detailed studies we might need to do. So maybe archaeological or architectural studies for maybe the trolley. And then we'll also start to do real coordination with agencies and any other person involved in the project with that screened alternative that will move forward. So the possible EA outcomes are a finding of no significant impact, or a FONSI, which is what we're hoping for. Or they would determine that we need to do additional studies, which would be an environmental assessment statement or an EIS, which we do not want to do, but we will see what FHWA determines on those. So the next steps of what you'll see, and I'm hoping you see publicly more of what we're doing, is DOT needs to provide us with a response on the historic resource information that we provided, that wonderful 160-page document that they've been reviewing. We're developing the draft scoping report for our GPI internal review and then Jason's review. That will then go to DOT for review and then to FHWA. We'll have a public information meeting or a scoping meeting, as I discussed. Then we'll take the comments from the reviews from the draft scoping report and the meeting to develop the final scoping report. From there, FHWA will review, and then we'll initiate the EA process. So the EA process is 12 months from initiation to determination. That is a federal requirement. So we will do a draft DDR EA. We'll have a public hearing. We'll do a final DDR EA, and then we'll get a determination. Any questions?
Questions?
Yes.
Chairman, on this one, in terms of the process, and the timeframes.
Yes.
So when are we thinking, like, let's start out simple, when's the draft scoping report expected to be done?
That's a great question. So we're hoping to get Jason the draft scoping report for his review in the next couple weeks, next week or so. So we're moving that ahead. And then in terms of reviews, I would love to give you a good timeline, but DOT and FHWA have been very difficult to nail down in terms of timeframes. Yeah. I would love to give you, it takes them 4 to 6 weeks. When we submitted that historic resource information, that was almost 8 weeks ago. And I just pinged them for a response because they said 5 to 7 weeks. So here we are, nothing from them. So something that's more complex that they don't see this often, it's hard to pin down. So we're estimating maybe a 12-month duration for the scoping process, and then 12 months for the EA process. But
From today, basically.
from today, basically,
So
yeah.
2 years.
We think.
Okay. And then let's call it 2 years. So are we through design or just preliminary design at that point?
Through preliminary
All
design.
right, so then we've got to go through final.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And get funding.
So realistically, we're looking at construction for say 3 years.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say that's a good estimate.
All right.
Yeah. So when we get the determination from the EA process, that will also be a very good time for us to get additional grant funding for the construction of the
So
bridge.
there's five segments,
5 segments.
and
Yeah.
we have design funding for all 5.
Yes.
Construction funding for the first 2.
Correct.
Are we at risk of losing any of the construction funding because we're not going to go to construction for 3-4 years?
As far as we've discussed, and we've brought this up when we discussed it with DOT and CRTC, no. They know the process that we're going through. They know what is holding up the process. It's not that we're not trying to use the funds. It's that we cannot legally use them until we go through this process. So no, it does not seem that they are.
And are there escalators? Obviously, from the time that we got the funding
Yeah.
for a certain project, it's going to be
Yeah,
more
inflation
expensive,
funding.
Are there escalators, or we just have to seek additional funding to close the gap?
We'll have to seek additional funding to close the gap. Yes. Yeah, because that is what we would call TAP funding. So TAP funding is a capped funding source. So that's something that we can't go back and ask for additional funds for.
And can we do that as part of the process, seek additional funding, or do we have to wait until we're through like the EA process in order to know exactly how much money we need to finish the project?
Good question. So we'd want to wait until we're done so that we can identify what the final route is and that it has the legal determination. Up until that point, the funders would find this project to be pretty risky to associate funds with.
Anything we can do as a county to
Keep
support
supporting us. It's one of those things that there is a lot going on and you don't see a lot coming out publicly, but I'm hoping now when we get the draft scoping report and we do a meeting, then there's going to be a downtime again until we get to final, then a downtime again. So just know that we're working on it and we'll try to give you updates as we go through.
Great. Appreciate the update.
Any other questions, comments? Sure.
Chairman, that 2 questions. The grant funding you're talking about, is that upfront funding or reimbursement funding?
It's generally reimbursable.
Okay.
It is potential because this is a very large project. Something that we've thought about, and I can't speculate if it will happen or not, is it could be state designated funds. And so oftentimes those are 100% reimbursable. So we'll have to see where the funding comes from. But generally it would probably be maximum 80% reimbursed, up to 100% potentially.
Okay.
we've already started pulling reimbursements on this. We pull those quarterly. So we're already getting reimbursed for the first funding we've received, so that's not sitting there. As we get bills from GPI, we submit to the state and get reimbursement for those.
And that's identified for Marchicelli funding, right? So that's only 5% local match on that.
The second question, if I may, Chairman, is the selection of the routes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want the best route for the flow and ease of use, etc. But there are also property issues.
Yes.
How much will the property issues be a factor in determining the final route, or is that impossible to say right now, if you know what I mean?
I do. It is hard to say. I think there is a balance between environmental impacts and property impacts, right? So if we avoid some of the larger property impacts, we may have more environmental impacts. If we have more property impacts, we may have less environmental impacts. So to give you an example, if we have a route that is, let's say, adjacent to a roadway instead of being completely off-road, that could impact 20 to 40 properties, where the other one might have impacted 4. But you might have wetland impacts, floodplain impacts, or other things associated with that 4 property route that you didn't have with the 40 property route. So it is tough to say, but that's part of the screening and evaluation. Mm-hmm.
And who ultimately applies the discretion that makes the decision about the preferred route? Does that naturally come out of the process through the evaluation, or is it ultimately somebody that weigh those things?
It ultimately is coming out of the process, but it's our job to make sure that we have a strong argument for how things are being screened and making sure they're being screened well with good project needs and objectives. And then it's ultimately up to FHWA to say that our argument is legally sound for us to move forward. So it's a combination of it, but I think support is something that's important when we go through this process. And then it's kind of up to FHWA of how they deem property versus environmental, and how we present that argument and factual information to them in the reports.
I'm not familiar with that organization that much, and just curious why they are the ones that have the authority.
FHWA, so that's the Federal Highway Administration. So that's what's referred to as the US DOT. So they are the funders of where we're getting all of our federal funds from. So it's ultimately up to them and their discretion of how that's done. When, let's say if a lawsuit were to be brought against a project, the first person to be named would be FHWA and New York State DOT, as well as the sponsor. So they take on a lot of risk with these projects for opening themselves up to legal challenges. Like you see that with I-81 or Kensington Expressway or larger projects, right? So it's just a smaller scale for this one.
And do we have a current price tag on all 5 segments to put it in the ground? Do we know?
I am working on that, and it's a lot.
Can you let us know, just so we can understand the significance of the financial impact? Obviously, the county's share may only be a small portion, but it's good as time goes on to renew our acknowledgement of what kind of costs we're talking about.
So this is a big range, and it obviously depends a lot on what the route will ultimately be. But I can tell you the different segment costs range from like 2 million, let's say, to 12 to 15 million. So when we add all 5 up, we could be anywhere from 25 million to 60 million. It just depends. It's one of those things we're looking at them, right? And then some of the costs, let's say we have wetland impacts. One of the costs we present is if you don't acknowledge the wetland impacts, you just kind of blaze through them, right? The other one is you acknowledge them and you do something like a boardwalk, which has lesser impacts because it's just for the substructure. But when you do a boardwalk, it's $1,500 a linear foot. That adds up pretty quick when you're trying to mitigate those wetland impacts that you have, if they're 1,000 feet long. So that's where a lot of that range can come from.
Yeah. Great.
The chairman is gonna comment over there.
Sure.
I would just say, this is the first trail project we're aware of that had to go through this EA process in New York State.
Wow.
So it sort of definitely caught us off guard.
Yeah, it caught CRTC off guard when they found out there could be broader implications to this being a process, and then it means that timeframes are a little difficult to nail down since it's kind of a newer situation for this.
What else?
Type other business.
Well, let me thank you for the excellent presentation and question. Your presentation is excellent. How can the other supervisors gain a copy of this? How can they view it?
I think
Yeah, Trace has it, we can send it out to her.
Okay.
And attach it to the minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have the floor.
Yes, just an update on our efforts to connect the Zim, the Veterans Bike Trail to the Zim Smith Trail. So we will be applying for $5 million, the maximum cap money here in the near future. And the town of Ballston is in the very positive position where we have a lot of extra fund balance, maybe too much. So December 9th meeting, the town board will be considering moving $1 million and appropriating that for our 20% match on the 5 million. And I anticipate that going through. So we'll be in good position should we get awarded the TAP grant.
Great news. When would you know? When are those
Yeah.
awards come out?
I would guess in the spring, but I
Okay.
don't know for sure.
Excellent. Quite an addition. Well, I want to thank everybody for the excellent questions, commentary, and responses from our guests. Jason, I want to thank you for your excellent mentoring through this process this year, keeping ourselves on track and everybody else. I want to thank the members of this committee for your support this year. And speaking for myself, it's been a real education and a very interesting one to get to know the ins and outs of this committee and how it works, all of the moving parts that are here. And trust me, unless you get involved, you have no idea how in depth and how important this is to the county and for the residents of this county as well. So I want to thank you for giving me the privilege and honor to chair this committee this year. Have a great Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you,
job.
Chairman.
Thank you.
You've done a nice job.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
We've been done over